Is the upgraded M2 15-inch MacBook Air good enough in 2024? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. So if you're thinking about buying a 15-inch M2 MacBook Air, you've probably watched 100 videos by now, right? Haven't you? And the 101st video, maybe this one, is the one that's going to give you that kind of little glimpse. Should you buy it or should you not? We all do it. No worries. We always look for that last video just to give us the kind of last little bit of information that we need. And out of those first 100 videos, everyone's talking about the specs of this thing. Everyone's talking about, the screen size and the nits of brightness and the CPU. And you've probably seen that 100 times. So I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm going to actually talk about real-world experience with an upgraded M2 15-inch MacBook Air and my real-world use and what my use is. So this video is going to be a little different. I'm going to talk about real-world use versus just specs. Now my video is late to the game. It's about 8 or 9 months since this thing came out. And I'm going to tell you why. Full honest disclosure. Number one, I'm not that rich. I can't afford to buy these things every time they come out. And most, like the big YouTubers, they can, but I can't. So that's number one. Number two, I like to give it a little bit of time to see how they actually what other people are saying about them. Are they good enough for my money before I just go out and buy one? Because then I got to sell it and all that stuff. So I usually wait a little bit. And then third, and this is I'm cheap. This is probably the biggest reason. I'm cheap and I want to get the best deal on this thing. So by waiting almost a year, right before the next iteration is going to come out, you're always going to get the best deal on these systems. Obviously it's going to be the best price. It's going to be on sale. And that's where I like to pick these up. So I at least can win a little bit from Apple. All right, so really quickly, this video is going to be about my journey of buying this and why, just what I do. I'm a small YouTube creator. I got about 23,000 subs. I've created about 600 different videos. I use 4K editing. And this thing, is it good enough for you if you do the same thing? So, stay tuned and watch this because this is going to be real world information on, is this good enough for a YouTube creator or anyone really below that? Meaning people that just do normal business tasks and stuff. If this can do editing, it can do all the other stuff. Again, this is the upgraded model, which we'll get into. All right, so again, this is the M2 MacBook Air with 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gigabyte SSD. Now, if you watch my videos, watch my channel before, I kind of follow the same theory. What made me buy this? What made me buy this right now in 2024, right before and possibly the M3 Airs are coming out? Price, and let me explain. So if you watch my videos before, I always say, if you're going to upgrade a MacBook Air, this is last year, don't do it because you're getting so close to the 14-inch MacBook Pro, you should probably go with that. This thing this thing in that state with 16 gigs of RAM, 512, normally is about $1,700. And when you can pick up a 14-inch for about $1,800, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But price in this case made a lot of sense for me. I picked this up, and I showed you pictures in a couple of videos ago, but I picked this up for $13.99 with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigabyte SSD, and this huge, beautiful screen. This thing is a beast for that money. $13.99 is a great price. All of a sudden, it made that price such a difference for me that it was a go. And I felt like I'm beating Apple on something. I'm getting a good price on this, and that's one of the advantages of buying late in the game. All right, my main use for this too is, and this might not be you, but this is what I'm using it for. I wanted a laptop that has a big enough screen that I can actually go to the coffee shop, go to the airport, go somewhere else, like the library, do some video editing, and not feel like I'm just scrunched on a small screen. This thing seemed like it was perfect. I had the RAM, I had the SSD space, but that's my use case. I use CapCut, I don't use even Final Cut Pro, but that's what I'm going to be using this for, and that's what this journey is all about. I got rid of an M1 MacBook Air base model, and that was a beautiful system, but I did notice some limitations. The screen was just too small for me to go off-site and comfortably edit videos. And then also on top of that, the RAM was I was butting up against that RAM issue with the 8 gigabytes. It's great for most people, but if you're doing, not heavy video editing, but middle maybe, it's just you're always wondering about that or worrying about it, so that's why I kind of went to this one. All right, so I went to the store, and I recommend you do this too. So I was looking at the 14-inch Pro, the 15-inch here, and I put them side by side at the Apple store. Now, to my surprise, I didn't notice a huge difference in the screen quality. Now, I know there is a difference. I know that the 14-inch has a better screen, hands down. But with my aging eyes, I didn't notice it. They both get about 500 nits of brightness in almost all the tasks except for HDR. I don't use a lot of HDR content. I don't watch a lot. So it didn't really affect me. This screen was obviously bigger. I'll get into that in a second. But overall, the quality of the screen looked about the same to me, especially in the Apple store. So I was kind of shocked there, and I kind of took a step back and said, honestly, if this is a Windows laptop, would I be happy with this? And the answer was 100%. It might even be the best one in all of the Windows laptops. So I couldn't complain. It's good enough for almost everybody. And then size was that major factor for me as far as I wanted to make sure that this was big enough to do editing off-site. Now the M1, like I said, was too small. So I put the 14-inch next to the 15-inch and I sat next to him and I looked at it and I'm like, geez, on paper that doesn't seem like a lot. But in reality, it's huge. You could get a lot more content on this thing than the 14-inch. You could actually, just seems like you get a lot more done without squishing it all into a little screen. So in reality, I recommend going to the Apple Store and checking them out in real life because there's a huge difference, more than I thought so. And I'll be honest here, when I saw it on paper, I didn't think it was a big issue, big deal. But when I see it in real life, this thing just seems, it appears bigger. I mean, maybe 20-30% bigger, but you can get a lot more stuff, especially when you're doing stuff like video editing. All right, let me explain a couple things. So I ended up picking this up on sale for $13.99. The thing about this thing is I can say for my workload, the 8 gig model, the base model, would not have been a good fit for me, not. But this upgraded 16 gigabyte, 512 gigabyte SSD is. I was always, like I said, always butting up against the 8 gigabytes. But with 16 gigs of RAM, there's a couple things I want to tell people. Number one, I mean, first of all, you're never going to really run into issues. When I do video editing and stuff like that, you know, I never reached really that swap limit like I did on the 8 gigabytes. I can have, 30 tabs open. I can have CapCut open. I can have Keynote open. I can have Pages open. I can have a whole bunch of stuff open, and it seems like it just never really goes into swap, meaning that it never fully utilizes 16 gigs of RAM. Now, I know there's use cases where people will get there, right? And I always tell people, the only reason you know you need more than 16 gigs is because you already know it. If you don't know, you probably don't. 16 gigs is usually, going from 8 to 16 is like a world of difference on these type of systems, on Apple systems. They just do a lot better. You're running up way less on the swap and stuff when you're into, with 8 gigs, I ran into that quite a bit. With this, I have yet to run into it. So I just want to give you a real world use there. That 16 gigs kind of made me take a step back, makes me I don't worry about it anymore. And even when I do swap, this thing is incredibly fast because with the 512 gigabyte SSD, not the base model, I was able to, it gets around 3,000, I think, always around 3,000, 3,100 to 2,900 megabytes per second on the reads and writes. So you got a lot faster, obviously, SSD in here as well than the base model. And that helps if the very few times you do need to, swap, you don't even notice it. It just works so seamlessly, so smoothly like butter. You just never notice that you're even on swap when you do need it. I, quite frankly, have never really looked on the screen and saw that I was using it, but I'm sure maybe once or twice I have. I'm just telling you, 16 gigs of RAM is golden on this thing if you're kind of doing a video editor like me where you do just not I wouldn't say huge productions. You see the quality of what I'm doing, but this is perfect for that kind of person. All right, again, for what I do, just so people understand, I use CapCut on this thing, and CapCut's a video editor. So I do like 3 or 4 streams of 4K, H.264.265, and I'll have 3 or 4 streams of 4K in there, some titles and some transitions and stuff like that. And this handles it like butter, like I just said, really, really smoothly. And the beauty of all that is that this thing, CapCut is not even nearly as optimized as Final Cut Pro for the Apple system here. So if you're using Final Cut Pro, you're even going to get better performance for stuff like that. I don't use any proxies, stuff like that. I don't pre-render stuff. I basically just use the footage right out of the camera and then I render it, or I export it, I guess. Not render, I don't even render, I just export, and it works perfectly. It's just butter smooth. So I just want to say, for my workload and for when I have 16 gigs, the 512 gigabyte SSD, I never have once felt like I needed the 14-inch. Not one time have I felt like, oh, this isn't enough power. So I just want to lay it out there that for what I do, a small YouTuber, I'm golden with this. All right, for other things like just web browsing and stuff, again, I keep saying butter, but it's like butter. I'll show you some examples here. I just don't notice at 60 hertz. I know people get into hertz, 60 hertz, or 90 hertz, 120 hertz. If you're a gamer, it might matter more. My eyes, again, maybe I have older eyes, I don't know, but I just, when I see it scrolling and stuff, it just is so smooth that I just don't even think about that. In fact, if I never knew about hertz, if nobody told me about that, it would never even come up in my mind. But I think I watch too many videos where people kind of say things and then it gets stuck in my head. But in reality, I just don't notice it, and it's just perfect. And then for opening apps and stuff like that, it's just, again, super fast. If this thing, I know that the 14-inch and 16-inch might be faster when you get into the Max or the Ultra, but if it was any faster, would I even notice it? Would 1 millionth of a second matter to me? It just doesn't. By the time I blink, it's up, so it doesn't really matter. That's usually using single core anyway, single core scores and stuff like that, so those are all the same across all those chips anyway. So this thing's just lightning fast, browsing and opening applications and stuff. It's just fast enough for 95% of people. And then the battery. So here's the battery in this thing. It lasts me on a regular basis like 13, 14, 15 hours if I'm just doing just regular web browsing. If I actually take this off site, I can actually do 6 or 7 hours, 8 hours of video editing, and maybe some more, maybe a little extra there. So I never even have to take my charger with me. I have no fear of running out of power. This thing is pretty incredible. It seems like it's better than the M1 MacBook Air for sure. I don't know why, I just have no idea, but it just, for my own workload, it just seems like you maybe get a few more hours out of it. Maybe I had a bad battery in my other one. Overall though, I would say, once again, this is better than almost any Windows laptop, in fact, probably anyone out there. So while it's maybe an hour or two less than the Pro models, and you can argue that depending on how the CPU works, I mean, again, you're at the top of the tier of battery use here. So battery, there's no complaint here. You'll never have an issue. You'll never feel like you need more. It's just a perfect system when it comes to battery. Now, everyone knows about the ports and stuff, and when I take this to the coffee shop, I mean, with my workload, I just put my content on this before I leave, my office here. I put this on the thing, and I don't even bring a dongle with me, to tell you the truth. I'm not like filming outside and putting it in here, but I know people do. If that's the case, you have two ports over here. I mean, the ports are fine. I guess they're over here. The ports are fine. They do whatever you want them to do. I mean, you're not going to use more than two. You put an SSD in one, you can put a little dongle in the other one. I mean, it's not a big deal, right? There's bigger life problems out there than that. So overall, do I even think about it anymore? No. I mean, it would be nice to have a SD card reader, of course, but I mean, I might use it maybe once every couple months, and it's just not worth it to me, so I'm not going to even think about it. All right, the size of it too, as far as the physical size, it's very light, feels light in the bag, so it's easy to travel with. I thought that was one thing I was worried about. I was thinking about the 16 at 1.16 inch MacBook Pro, way too heavy, it's like a brick. So if you're dealing with that, I mean, don't worry about this. You put this in your bag. While I know it's very similar in weight to the 14 inch Pro, it just feels lighter for some reason. I mean, I know it's not, and I know that's physically impossible, but overall, just the way it's kind of like, the weighting of it, or the balancing of the system, it just feels lighter in the hand, but it never feels heavy to me, so don't worry about that with traveling. The speakers also. The speakers basically come out of a hinge here. There's no speakers on the side, and it bounces off the screen. And what I have to tell people is I'm not an audiophile. I basically love the sound of this thing. It's better than my M1 Air for sure, and it's better than any Windows laptop I've ever had out there. Is it as good as a 14-inch? No, it's got better bass there. I understand that. But if this thing was the only one that Apple came out with, everyone would be happy with it. There would be no comparison. It's just a good overall sound. So I actually edit videos off this thing without even headphones. It works really well. And I mean, I just can't complain about it. So again, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, oh, it's got a better system on the 14-inch. I listen to them side by side at the Apple Store. I recommend you do it. It's a little bit better, but overall, the way I use it, I'm not listening to like hip hop music all the time and stuff with giant bass. So for my use case, it wasn't a big deal. All right, so it comes down to, why did I buy this? So I bought this because of the price, let's just be honest. And it was because I got the 16 gigabytes, 512 gigabyte SSD. I would not have bought the base model, but it feels like I won. So I know that people are going to ask the main question, the M3s are coming out, the M3 Airs are coming out 15 inches in a month or two. And should we wait? Should I wait for that? Well, you can wait for sure. But I mean, think about this for a second. If you wait, you're not going to get the same deal, right? You're not going to get that $13.99 price. You're going to be paying probably $17.99, $1,700, $1,800, somewhere in that range. So if you're like me and you're cheap and you just like to beat Apple one time, now granted, we may not be winning, but we think we are. I would buy this because this is actually more than most people need. It's great for video editing. You can get probably even a better deal coming up on it. And why worry about it, right? I mean, the only thing you really have to worry about is the M3 version. We already know the benchmarks on that. I mean, it's not that much greater. But we also know that maybe Apple will kind of come to their senses and maybe ship it like 12 gigs as a base model. And then you might, consider, hey, I got screwed or something. But overall, that's about the only thing that might happen. And I wouldn't even worry about that either because you're going to have 16 gigs here. And for $13.99, I think this is probably one of the best systems you can buy for that cost. Again, we're running a fine line here because if this goes up in cost, I totally don't recommend it at $1,700, $1,800. But for $13.99, it doesn't seem like that much of a difference. But you're talking 30, 35, whatever, a third less money and stuff. I think it fits into a slot that it's really good for most people, especially people like me that do video editing, do more kind of work that I would classify as maybe a little higher tier. But I'm not going to be someone that's going to be on the level of, like, again, I always say Marquise Brownlee, but that has a huge production company. So if you're like me and you were thinking about buying something and you always get really nervous when you do, I'm going to say with this one, do not get nervous. Now it is a fingerprint magnet because usually it's this midnight blue color that's on sale, but I think that's going to change. And there's something I solved this with, and I'm going to share that in the next video, that fingerprint problem. I'll share that in the next video. Stay tuned for that. It's really cool. But beyond that, overall, I think this is still a great system. I mean, but I think the price is going to drop on the other colors coming up here as soon as the M3s launch. So don't sweat it. Sit back and relax. You can sell these things, especially this model with the 16 gigs. It's going to be kind of a specialty model later on, so you're going to probably get good money coming back for this. People are going to be looking for this model over the base. They don't sell a ton of these. So I think you're in good shape here. This is going to last you many years, and don't look back. I mean, buy it. create, do whatever you want, what makes you happy, and just don't be upset that the next one comes out, because it's always going to happen. It's always going to be the fact where 3 months down the line, it's always something better out. It's Murphy's Law. So buy it. I think it's one of the best systems out there for the price right now. Is the 14-inch better? Arguably, yes, right? But it depends on cost. Again, the only reason I recommend this is for that sale cost. Beyond that, I say, you have to consider all the information that I kind of dismissed on the 14-inch. But without that, it's just an easy thing for me to say is it's a buy. I'm a video editor. I do a YouTube channel with 23,000 subscribers, and it's perfect for me. I don't need anything more. I think 95% of the people out there it's perfect for. And I think, if you want to beat Apple once, try to get a sale on a device, and let's go. Talk to you soon, and we'll talk to you probably in a couple days on a new video. Peace.